When we think about the first English colonies in America, we usually jump straight to conquest and settlement. But for Jamestown, its first 15 years were all about something way more complicated: its trade relationship with a really powerful Powhatan Confederacy. And this wasn't just about swapping goods. It was about survival, it was about politics, and it was about a huge shift in power. So, let me start by asking you a question. When those first colonists showed up in 1607, what do you think was the one thing they wanted more than anything else? What was the most valuable commodity in their world? And the answer? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. It wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. It wasn't even land. Not at first. It was corn. Just plain, simple corn. Because before you can build an empire, you have to figure out how to not starve to death. And that one simple fact shaped everything that came next. This whole relationship has been called a volatile axis. Think about it like that. For 15 years, the entire fate of the Jamestown colony was spinning on this one axis of trade. It started with the English being completely dependent, totally desperate, and it ended with them holding all the cards. So here's how we're going to walk through this story. We'll start with that first desperate bargain for food, then look at the Powhatan's initial advantage and the fragile peace that came after. Then we'll get to the tipping point, how it all collapsed into war and how that set a tragic pattern for the future. All right, part one, a desperate bargain. So picture this. It's 1607. The English have just landed, they have no idea what they're doing, they don't know the land, and they can't feed themselves. I mean, their situation is absolutely dire. And the power dynamic here is it's not even close. On one side, you've got the Powhatan Confederacy, right? A massive alliance of over 30 chieftains who know this land like the back of their hand and, most importantly, control all the food. And on the other side, 104 starving colonists. The power wasn't just tilted, it was completely one-sided. So for the Powhatan, this wasn't just a chance to get some interesting European trinkets. No. For them, trade was a tool. It was the way you did politics, the way you handled diplomacy, and they were masters at it. And the man running the show was Wahoo Seneca, who the English called Chief Powhatan. And his strategy was actually brilliant. He didn't want to wipe out the English. He wanted to absorb them. His plan was to use food to basically turn Jamestown into another tribe under his control. They'd be useful for their metal tools, but they would answer to him. So what was actually being traded? Well, the Powhatan were offering literal survival: corn, meat, furs. And in return, the English had things that were incredibly valuable to the Powhatan, not for staying alive, but for status. Copper was the big one. Copper was like gold, and it became the main currency in this whole exchange. Now, this period of tense "you give me corn so I don't die" trade eventually shifted. Something pretty unexpected happened that led to a period of calm, a very fragile peace that would completely change the colony's future. And that turning point came in 1614 with the marriage of Pocahontas to John Rolfe. This wasn't just about two people. In the Powhatan world, this created a formal truce through kinship, and it worked. It led to 8 years of relative peace. But, and this is a big but, during that peace, the English population skyrocketed, and their focus shifted from just surviving to making money. And that meant one thing: land for tobacco. So it was during this fragile peace that the whole balance of power started to flip. The colonists finally figured out how to break free from their dependence on the Powhatan, and that volatile axis we talked about began to tip big time. It really happened in 2 key steps. First, the English finally got the hang of growing their own corn. This was huge. It meant they didn't have to trade to eat anymore. Second, and this was the real game changer, John Rolfe figured out how to grow a type of tobacco that people in Europe went crazy for. All of a sudden, Jamestown had its own cash cow. And this new economic reality was just stark. The value of the furs and other things the Powhatan could offer was nothing compared to the massive profits from tobacco. The economic power had completely shifted. The English didn't need the Powhatan to survive anymore. In fact, now they just saw them as getting in the way of more profit. So, with the English now feeding themselves and having this bottomless greed for tobacco land, that fragile peace was pretty much doomed. The relationship that started with trade was about to become one of all-out war. After Chief Powhatan died, his brother Opechancanough took charge, and he saw the English not as junior partners, but as a genuine threat to their existence. He watched them spread out, building plantations, and he decided the only way to save his people was to get rid of the English completely. So, in 1622, he launched this huge, coordinated surprise attack all across the colony. He killed 347 colonists. That was about a quarter of their entire population. Now, it didn't destroy Jamestown, but it absolutely destroyed any chance of peace. The English response was immediate, it was brutal, and it was a policy of total war. So, if you look back at this whole 15-year story, you see this really clear pattern. You go from the desperation phase, where the English just want to survive and the Powhatan are in charge. Then you have the truce, where the motives start to split and the power balance shifts. And finally, you end up in a state of war, where the English goal is to exterminate or subjugate, and their dominance is total. The relationship just completely transformed. So why? Why did this happen? Why couldn't this trade relationship, which started out as mutually beneficial, actually last? Well, the answer really goes down to a fundamental clash of how they saw the world. At its very core, this was a clash of worlds. For the Powhatan, trade was about reciprocity. It was about building an ongoing relationship with mutual obligations. For the English, trade was a transaction. You exchange goods, the deal is done, and you walk away. And you really see this when it comes to land. The Powhatan thought they were giving the English permission to use land as allies. The English thought they were buying the land permanently, like a product. They were speaking two completely different languages. There's a line from one of the historical accounts that just sums up the whole tragic story perfectly. The trading posts eventually became fortresses, and the trade goods became weapons of war. And that really leaves us with this huge final question. The story of Jamestown and the Powhatan is this powerful early example that forces us to ask, when does a partnership, even one that starts from mutual need, turn into conquest? Because that's the pattern that was set here, and it's a pattern that would repeat itself again and again.